open, I think, the special meeting of the Village of Brookfield Zoning Commission with a roll call, please.
Commissioner Evans. Here. Commissioner Miller. Absent. Commissioner Saborn.
Present.
Commissioner Svoboda.
Here.
Commissioner Straight.
Here.
Commissioner Weber here. Chairperson Grunt. Absent.
I think we need to, do we have to call or swear me in as pro temp?
Yes.
Who would like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Evans.
Aye.
Commissioner Saborn.
Aye.
Commissioner Svoboda.
Aye.
Commissioner Straighta.
Sorry,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry. Commissioner Weber. Aye.
Next thing on the agenda for tonight is approval of meeting minutes. We'll do them one by one. So the first item is the meeting minutes from the date of January 28th, 2026. Does anybody have any comments, questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of meetings. We'll approve them all at the end, I guess. Is that okay? Yeah. Next date is February 26th, 26. Any comments or questions on those? No. Move on to March 19th, 2026. Questions or comments?
Revised to reflect my absence.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Move on to March 26th, 2026. Any questions, comments on those? Hearing none, we recommend approval of the meeting minutes for January 28th, 2026, February 26th, 26, March 19th, 2026, with the revision of noting your absence, Commissioner, and then approval of March 26th, 26 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Evans.
Aye.
Commissioner Saborn.
Aye.
Commissioner Svoboda.
Aye.
Commissioner Straight.
Aye.
Commissioner Weber. Aye.
So then we'll move on to reviewing the parking portion of the draft of the zoning code.
Okay, well, this is really just the big debate we've all been kind of talking about. I think as you saw the chapter, there were some minor revisions to language, some additions that were put in there. I don't think anything that substantially kind of impacts the design of parking areas. But really, this is to discuss the approach that's presented in this draft that proposes the elimination of minimum required parking. And essentially what this means is that the code would not have a minimum parking requirement. It doesn't mean that parking won't be constructed, and any parking that is constructed must meet the standards of the code, including things related to the landscape chapter about, perimeter and interior parking lots. There's a number of reasons places are really starting to turn to this approach. In particular, Brookfield's built out, so, your commercial areas are your commercial areas, residential's residential. And so what you're really seeing is more redevelopment and infill than any kind of large greenfield development that would happen. And so we're dealing with a limited amount of land. When you eliminate minimum parking requirements, a couple of things happen. Trying to accommodate and require all the parking on site kind of goes away, so the actual site design and, where the building's placed, how things are structured and oriented on the site, become more prominent just because they don't have to accommodate the amount of parking. When you can't accommodate parking, you need variances. And when you need variances, they cost time, they cost money, and there's no guarantee that a variance to your parking requirement will be granted. It also really we've for years, as you've seen in codes, have these parking standards, 1 per 500, 1 per 600, just these numbers, which are really relatively arbitrary. Two things can be a grocery store, one could be unsuccessful, and Trader Joe's could never have enough parking. And so many places have taken an approach for many years where certain commercial areas are completely exempted from parking. That's one thing that's been going on, but now other places have started to look at kind of a full-blown, do we really need to have parking minimums in place? And so that is the approach that we took here, understanding parking variances come up very frequently, understanding kind of the site limitations that are here as well, that perhaps this is something that would work, in particular to kind of encourage that economic development climate, taking out that variance process, things like that for parking. Big policy decision, so this gets thrown to the group to discuss and determine the approach that you all would like to take, whether it be that which is here within the current proposed draft, kind of taking that and punting that over to the village board to have them make that decision at the policy level of the village board. So there's really a number of different ways you can do it. We can kind of split the baby, so to speak, have parking for some areas, not other areas, some uses, not other uses. It really just comes down to the policy decision that you all would like to make.
I think this is something that, when it comes to commercial parking requirements, the developers hire consultants who will do these studies for them to indicate how much parking they will actually need based on their type of business. And I don't think that it is right for staff to dictate how much parking should be required when a consultant may know the ins and outs of many retailers on what they've needed for parking. So I don't think we should have a minimum standard for commercial, but I do think a minimum standard should be kept for residential.
So if a business was gonna rely on, heavily on street parking, would that still be the case where we wouldn't wanna regulate parking or offer suggestions to the developers?
My thought was that I'm strictly thinking of on-site
Got it,
parking.
like at Tischler's or
Right.
a restaurant, okay.
I mean, because whenever you go by, a Target or, other big box retailer, the only time that you're probably ever going to find that parking lot full is on a Black Friday, possibly. But any other time, you just got this big expanse of impervious surface that doesn't,
May not be necessary.
well, that too.
You make a very good point, but I don't see us getting many big box stores. I think what we are more likely to get are a car repair shop that doesn't have enough parking spaces. So they're parking all of their broken down cars, or their customers are all parking down on the streets. Or not necessarily a developer coming in. You're right, those developers have all of the research, and they would have the ability to say, this is actually what we need. I think it's the smaller businesses that are gonna come in and say, I believe that I can do this, and we're just gonna push it through. And I think that we see that sometimes. We have a lot of small family-owned businesses in town, and they're not necessarily gonna do that research and find out that they actually do need parking spaces on the site.
I would clarify my position and say that I do agree with you. I'm thinking more of a retail, commercial component rather than a, trying to think of the category that we would usually have these under, but.
In service business.
Right. Service businesses such as repair shops, mechanics, I think that, I was thinking of that as being under a separate category rather than, the retail component.
I think it might be a separate use, but if we're looking at commercial districts, then
Right, because almost like spot zoning each parcel separately. Not a spot zoning, but it's,
I find it interesting, a month ago, 2 months ago, when people over parking came up and we got the maps and things like that, that this is what was going to happen. You're seeing this kind of start to grind to a halt at the state level, right? Municipalities, big and small, are pushing back through the IML, saying that local control is being taken away. We know our towns best, allow us to guide. And while I appreciate looking at each area, if we're going to split the baby, as you say, which is one of my favorite terms, I do think we should go area by area on that. Because I think that things like this are developer over resident. And while we want to see development, you can quickly see that their goals are not always necessarily aligned with what the broader interest may have. And to even Grand Boulevard, if, you know, you loosen it there, they'll just count street parking, and what does that do to the established businesses that are there? As you redevelop Grand Boulevard, how many on-site things can they do, or can they just push into the neighborhoods? We put up, you know, we just approved a large development. While I agree with the development, voted yes, and I know that those parking spots along the tracks are gonna be taken, at what point do you start to see critical mass? And while I appreciate statements like, I want to have a parking problem, we heard that at the last meeting, that doesn't mean Brookfield can solve that problem once it comes. And when you see municipalities like LaGrange, who are equally built-up communities at this point, out there working with the IML against people over parking, it gives me pause to say, you know, as some of that mass is moving forward in a different direction, I think we should take note of that when we make our decisions.
I would agree. It feels like the total elimination of parking really shifts the burden onto the village, where, as opposed to you know, developers. But I do think residents should have a parking requirement. But shifting that burden to the village, it's the cost, the maintenance, the planning, the solutions, right? And I'm not sure if the village has a long-term, or even a short-term plan to resolve that. Long-term is really what's gonna make this successful or not.
Because I think I mean, speaking to that, and again, we're not, you start throwing up these developments in this immediate area, and, I mean, we know the village can't put up parking decks. That's not realistic. That's not where their money is gonna be spent. Maybe I'm speaking for them, but knowing the costs associated with that a few infills are not gonna pay for that in property taxes. It's not gonna, and so, again, we're shifting the burden to the residents of the municipality rather than having developers from the start being very cognizant of what they're developing and what they're putting in, rather than just saying, it's your problem, figure it out. Which I don't believe that we won't see that. I think we will see that.
My thought goes to some of the projects, great projects that had been approved with minimal parking requirements. And I wonder if we could go back in time and we didn't have that control over parking. Could the developers have convinced themselves that they were throwing 1 or 2 or 3 additional units, they could still make it work? They probably could have or would have. And I think the village would be, or that area, that part of town would not be a very pleasant place to live. Unfortunately, we do live in a situation, my home is on a block where parking was not a consideration when they were allowing for churches, for example. And yes, parking is an issue, and the quality of life is not quite as good as it could be, based upon that lack of oversight 50 years ago.
And I think you have some of these review boards in a municipality to guide and shape. And I understand that it could come across as a NIMBY type attitude towards development. But planning and zoning boards exist across the state. for these very reasons, so that you can shape what your community looks like, the community that you live in, the community that you know. Putting two churches and a school on the same block is probably not great for the residential that's there. Again, all of us choose to live where we live, but if you have the opportunity to shape these things and see them and know them, I mean, to Chris's point, when we were talking before the meeting, he knows the property that we put the fence up on intimately well, because he grew up here, he's seen it, he knows it. And to have that resident input in these matters of development, I see as important. I don't see it as a hindrance, and I think parking is something that should have oversight. There should be requirements. So I think we have some agreement that parking is important for development. I think we look for some shaping or guidance from staff, rather than just say, we'll keep our current language as is.
So it sounds like, I mean, I have some more arguments I can make, that just saying, basically, if you tell them not to build parking, it's not like they're not gonna build parking. Some businesses know that they can't function unless they have a parking lot, and that's, construction projects can't go through without parking due to financing from the banks and the way their financing all works out. So it is something that still and we've seen that multiple times, that they're still building parking. It's not that it's not happening, it's just that it's not happening per the numbers. But it sounds like I could keep making those arguments, and it's probably not gonna go very far. But I will say, kind of one of the things that you can do, which is fairly typical, is, the station area districts have changed now to this downtown core. You may wanna consider exempting some of the districts, it doesn't have to be everybody, but some of them, from a parking requirement. I know LaGrange has been mentioned before, their downtown does not have parking requirements, it's exempted from it, it's an optional thing to provide. So we can look at, and I would say, in an area like the former station area or current downtown, that consider something like that as being at least exempted from the minimum parking requirements.
For commercial purposes or commercial and residential?
I mean, my argument would be the entire thing, which is
Right.
fairly typical to any downtown, even downtowns of this size, is that it all, because you're really trying to build that area up. I mean, you're really trying to take advantage of the transit station, it being the core. Most places, when they exempt the downtown, again, similar sizes to Brookfield, say, you'll figure out the parking. If you need parking, if the bank says you need parking for residents, you're gonna find a way to build that parking.
So,
But where?
purely imaginary numbers. Let's say that the Strand Theater property is developed, Brookfield Theater, and somebody wants to throw in 20 residential units. The developers and the bankers could convince themselves that we only need 6 parking spots. It's gonna happen. But we as residents who walk and bike and drive that area all the time truly would know that that's not realistic. That would not be a pleasant decision for the residents.
I'm just thinking, and in my mind, I'm just thinking of this immediate Grand Boulevard location where you have multiple large properties going up. Off-site parking for residents does not exist. It's not there. So they will park in your commercial area, and that will impact your commercial business. Like, what does staff feel? Where do you feel like they'll just figure it out and park 3 blocks away? Like, where are they gonna go?
Well, I can address some of that.
Sure.
So in terms of, for example, with Triangle Site, any of the lenders that are having anything underwritten, lenders will underwrite marketability. So without any parking, your loan's not going to get underwritten. So for example, the new development that we're looking at, we're talking very in-depth with those developers. It's looking like a 40 unit with commercial on the bottom, assuming the commercial is not gonna have parking requirements, they're still going to need some parking at the top. So there's
So let's talk about that, because last I had followed it, it was still being jammed up, so that's gone through.
No, it's gone through. What IML has objected to, rightly so, municipalities are objecting to the loss of control for zoning, requirements that make sense, for each individual municipality. So that's why a lot of municipalities have joined with IML to object.
I
right?
understand.
But the People Over Parking Act has already been
I
signed
understand.
into law.
So
Yeah.
as of right now, this is a moot conversation for this area.
It's a moot point. You
It's,
can't
a-
tell
and
us
I get that.
Really moot.
I apologize. My understanding was that the fight was trying to get it stopped, but it's trying to essentially repeal it now, or put
Or put
controls.
controls on it is what they're looking at, is like saying the municipalities with over, with under like 1 million people will be exempt. That's a big unknown.
So, tomorrow, if the developer put in something for the Strand and it was after June or it's going to be, in that window,
Right.
we have no controls at this point, right? It doesn't fall under purview anyhow?
That is correct.
The only control we have is because we own the property.
Correct. Good point.
But not for the Strand Theater, are we talking about the Brookfield
The-
Theater?
I'm sorry, I'm talking about the
Oh, the
Brookfield
old-
Theater
yes,
site.
I'm
Yes,
sorry.
my fault.
Yeah.
Strand, I didn't,
Yes,
that's,
that's absolutely correct.
else. Okay.
And they're constrained by their lender, that's when they're constrained by the marketability of it.
Now, do these lenders have a firm,
Do they have a firm understanding?
or have they published their minimum requirements for parking where we could look at it and say, yes, they are being reasonable, we appreciate their thought and concern about Brookfield, and yes, we will never drop down below this minimum parking rate of 1 per unit or 0.75 per unit, or they're gonna base their decision on each individual project?
Each individual project
It's each
for commercial
project.
underwriting.
Yeah, there's no thing that they work with, they just look at whatever the project is and make their calculations based on that.
Because they're looking at revenue stability per project, regardless of what village it is, so from a commercial lending standpoint, it's pretty strict. Maybe not as strict as the village would like it.
Right, and do they, the strictness, is it documented anywhere? Have they
In their
put it into their banking book and say, yes, we're gonna be very strict and careful about these parking decisions, and this is what we want, or again, it's kind of an arbitrary decision?
They're not
It's-
gonna tell you.
Yeah.
They're not gonna tell us, so
Where-
that's the problem.
Unless you have a project, then
Right,
they'll talk to you.
exactly.
But,
Yeah, that's the concern that, in theory, they could say, we're gonna give you 0.3 spots per unit, because we feel that it's viable, and when residents may not, commissioners may not, trustees may not, and yet we've lost control over that little bit of input we would have.
So we're not talking if this holds, we're not talking train corridor, we're not talking Grand Boulevard, we're not talking Broadway district? Only part of Broadway gets, I'm looking at the map Scott provided. So you have essentially 31st Street.
All of Ogden.
Ogden is mostly, Ogden is all encompassing. Looks like we're going home early, guys. No, residential.
As Bill said, you should say, save a marriage, call home.
It-
Kind of going off on a tangent here, but,
Sure.
Two things. One, the small guys, like Trustee Hendricks talks about, they're not building a building. They're taking an existing building. And then it's the big guys, the old joke, right? Walmart, they way overpark, there's a lot of houses that have maximum parking requirement. 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve, you go to Walmart, you're getting a parking spot. 3 big stores by my house are full of car dealer cars, because the parking lots are so big, and no one ever parks there.
Yeah,
You drive by, you go, wow, look at all the guys at, Hobby Lobby, and they're all, Hyundais, everything, all brand new, sitting there waiting to go to the car dealer down the street.
yeah,
So the issue may be, if there are standards, I mean,
No,
risk,
no, go ahead, yeah.
Maybe the arbitrary 250 square feet or blah, 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 62-221, the extent of control that came up on 31st Street, you know, which the way it's interpreted by our municipal attorneys is, if anybody has a 25-foot wide lot with a one-car garage on the alley, and you remodel your bathroom, you need a parking variance, because you don't have two cars. So we need to fix that, but, what was my point now? Now I forgot.
But it's new, I guess that's the point though, is that there's nuance to it, right? And just the blanket elimination doesn't make sense.
Yeah, from a single family standpoint, you know, that all makes sense. You know, we allow on-street parking, which, you know, that's great. So we want the 25-foot wide lots to have their garage, which is why we've granted those variations of garages over the years. You know, and La Michoacana at 8 Corners and the Taquerial Grande at 31st Street, those are the small business people trying to expand that cannot build parking.
Sure.
Those sites don't have it anymore. And so that's where, dare I say, some of that elimination of those requirements comes from.
And I feel like, at least over the course of the last few years, that I've been able to be a part with you guys, and you were here before me, but it seems like the board has in general been pretty apt to work with all of those places. But it gives a moment of pause to say, is this correct for the village? Is this correct for the business? Is this correct for the residents, before that's put in place? And I think that's the impetus for it, is to create that push or that pause for just a minute to make sure that it's thought through at every level. I agree with you, Scott. It's ridiculous that you need a variance if you're on a 25-foot lot and you remodeling your bathroom. That's crazy, and it should be fixed immediately. But when it comes to business, and where we have, our business districts are mixed with residential so closely, and becoming more so as we develop, it's good, but to help guide or shape that is an important thing. I still believe that. The easier way is to say no restraints, but I don't think that's the right answer.
Yeah, I would agree. In a residential area, I know where I live is, in particular, everybody has a garage. They don't park in the garage. The street is packed.
Or suppose that you're supposed to park in the garage and not store it, you know,
But that's, again,
But that's-
thinking that the market is controlling parking, and
it's not.
they've decided not to park in the garage, so we can't do a thing about it.
Yeah, yeah.
When I think that's to the idea, like, okay, cars are going, like, I've heard for 15 years being part of municipal government, cars are going away. They're not. It hasn't happened. Everybody tells us, put a bike closet in the place and the car's gonna go away. No, they have a closet full of stuff and not a bike and another car. Like, we're seeing it, it's happening. I just have not yet seen the reverse of this.
I think it does happen. I think that it's not realistic to say that it can happen here, right now.
Sure.
Because we don't have the public transit that supports that. And I don't know, and we, as a village, can't make that happen. We have 3 train stations, so you can get to Aurora, you can get to Chicago, and you have 1 bus line that can, I think, get you to the hospital. And that's all we've got. So yeah, there are Ubers and there are Lyfts and things like that, but you need cash to make that happen. So people who are gonna be moving into studio apartments might not have that kind of funding. And they might still need to go see their, go up to see their friend in Evanston or their aunt out in St. Charles. And without a car, this town isn't quite to the place, I think, where we can residential parking requirements. And whether that means one space per unit across the board, including single family, I don't know. I don't know.
What's helpful is that we do have that oversight, we do have the ability to drop it down from 2 spots per unit to 1 or 0.75 in a transit or pedestrian-oriented district. But again, having that flexibility, having that input gives me a little bit of comfort.
So really what we're talking about, due to the state law, effectively all of Brookfield's gone, part of Ogden. There's no minimum parking, period. Decision's been made for us, correct? So it's really 31st Street and 47th, and then the residential that we're really looking at. And probably 8 Corners. I don't know if a little bit of that gets grabbed, I don't have the map.
Yeah,
The north
if
side.
if the map Scott provided holds true, it takes a portion of Broadway, essentially. It cuts south of Washington, west of Maple, and it only takes, like, it has CVS. I don't know how strictly I should follow the circle.
I can't take pride in not switching to that, or JS consultant did it based on
Oh.
the statute, but I recall being here, so it basically shields Washington.
Yes, I would say that's a fair interpretation.
It's a little off because they didn't capture the Congress Park District, so it does
Oh,
go,
yeah.
that
Keeps going
oblong
down.
keeps going west, southwest.
Good point.
So if you look at, like we say, what's left, we have 31st Street and 47th, and part of the 8 Corners sub-area there. And are we gonna see, like at 8 Corners, the CVS, parking?
Oh, yeah. But, and I think there's places where there's agreement, and it's in those large, what he was talking about, Steve was talking about at the beginning, and what you were talking about, large surface lots in some of those areas now are good to have, because you can do, when development comes, you can have mixed use of them. It's areas like this that, for me, I don't know when these developers come, where you're going to put them. Something has to come down for that to happen. We talk about LaGrange having no problem with it. Well, they also have a surface lot that's bigger than our entire business district. And then a parking deck. Like, the only way to do that in this area is to demo something, and that's counterproductive. And I think that's where I just pause, not anti-development, it's the realism of it. We want to develop that area, I just don't know how you do it from a parking sense. But up by Broadway, there's a lot of parking, it was realized that way, it was built that way. And that's where you can have a restaurant that has a terrible parking lot developed, sharing the parking behind, because it's desperately needed. Thank goodness that Tischler's is there and CVS is there and all the street parking is there, or else that business wouldn't sustain because no one would be able to park there. And that's where the nuance of it comes down, and that's why I'm against the people over parking law, but that's me pontificating, I'm sorry. So anyhow, I would say then in the residential areas, I wouldn't look to change anything from the code as it stands right now, other than if we know that there's ridiculous things associated, like what Scott said, a 25-foot home that can't get a permit without a variance. And that's the least nuanced approach. So anybody that wants to give more, feel free.
Well, we have a lot of, if we go through the original code, which I don't have, doesn't it go down through the uses and have parking requirements per each use?
Something like that. Yeah, and that's fairly typical, that if we are gonna keep parking requirements for non-residential, in the other districts like Ogden and 31st and all of that, then we would just match it to what's in the use table and create parking standards. It sounds like keeping what you have for residential, when residential's not exempt, is what you would like. I do think you should consider maybe loosening up parking standards. I don't know what they are offhand, but I know as places move on, they loosen them up a bit, so, you know, things like retail are 1 per 500 now, rather than it being like 1 per 200 or 250. Just to kind of be more practical on how these things are used, you know, everybody, unlike, you know, except for Black Friday, as pointed out, you know, people are kind of coming and going at different times, so you don't need as much parking as has been required in the past. So we would need to, obviously, if that's the approach, need to build in the reference to the People Over Parking Act and create a parking table and, basically update that almost, probably mostly just on the non-residential side of things. Because, the uses are very different from what the uses are, so we would match it to that use table you've all been looking at.
It might be useful for us to, maybe on a, I don't know if it's just on a staff level, to make an official map of what the people over parking, what lots the people over parking law affect, so that residents or developers or whoever can come in and look at a particular parcel and know for sure, without having to go through any staff discussions or anything like that, to just know what applies on that lot. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, if your GIS consultant can create the map precisely to the, instead of the bubble map, to precisely to the lots. That's something we can just put in the code.
Yeah, we can ask them, this was just, the one with the circle.
Is that for residential too, or just commercial?
Well, you know.
It's everything, it's everything.
Okay,
It's,
that's what I wanted to hear.
Commercial, industrial,
And we can
whole-
put it on the website and then update all of our sites where the developers will go, so we can have
Yeah.
it included in there.
Then there's-
That's always the first question we get asked with all
Right.
developers.
And then there's no ambiguity. It's not people out there trying to measure based on different standards and, yeah.
Mark, it looks like we can become developers and knock our houses down and build. Let's go.
I think you
That's
got room
exciting.
for
We're in the
80 units
circle.
On your side, I got room for 12 on mine.
Yes, but that doesn't allow you to build a parking lot on your lot.
We don't need a parking lot. We're gonna build the biggest residential structure we can
And then-
on our 125-foot lot by 125. We're gonna jam it in there between 2 churches and a school, and it's gonna be excellent for the
Actually,
community.
within a block, it's like 4
Property
churches,
values are gonna
if
soar.
you really count
I
by
love
the
it.
crow flies.
I'm sorry, the NIMBY in me is coming out. But these are the things that I think get lost when local control is taken away. Local control is important, and it's why we have so many units of municipal government in this state. And without eliminating them, you're gonna continue to have these conversations.
Do we have support from the commission to loosen some of the parking requirements generally? Or to look at that, the ones that currently exist?
I think looking at them and talking them through makes sense.
Oh,
It's just car. But we don't have the
mhm.
current in our, so we can't
Right.
pull them up. Or at least I don't have them. We don't have them in front of us, the current, because this was written as no requirements. So we would have to either pull them up or have them, or if we were gonna talk about them deeper, or have another meeting.
I would suggest we need to clarify in the code, if we have parking standards, our current code is contradictory, some places it says useful, some places it says
Oh, it's all gonna be changed,
Yeah,
yeah.
something that talks about, all one per employee, which is a terrible standard.
Yeah, we can, typically when we create parking standards, so they'll have to be new because the uses don't line up one-to-one anymore, because you have a better use table now that kind of deals with everything that you're looking at. We would create what we see generally in communities like Brookfield of what is a typical standard, using, objective standards like gross floor area, getting away from things like employees, which is a nice game people can play, or sometimes become a victim of. And so what we can do is I can show the parking, I can do a table that I can give to staff that, you know, you guys may not even need me for that meeting, whenever the parking standards are, just to show what the current standard is and what our recommendation is. And our recommendations are just based on what we kind of see everywhere, so.
Something that maybe to consider, and I'll talk out of the other side of my mouth as well, is, you know, if people over parking continues on, you know, you're probably looking at half of the Eight Corners district is in, half is out. You're probably having to look to see what you do there, because that would be an administrative nightmare for all of you at the staff level to say, like, what and how.
I think that's one reason having that very clear parcel by parcel, knowing what exactly is affected might help.
Right. But yeah, I guess I would be open to the conversation of, do you just then at that point incorporate that in its entirety, or do you not? I mean, there's still some large developable pieces on there that are currently vacant, waiting for redevelopment with non-taxable use. Currently, it looks like that's excluded.
It does.
Something to think about. Another good reason why boards who know their municipality really well can talk through these topics.
And it's so interesting, the state law is written just as an as the crow flies distance, is that right? The state law is that people over parking is written as the crow flies, right? The distance that you're to measure.
Yeah.
So that takes absolutely absolutely doesn't take into effect the fact that this eastern side of Ogden, those people would have to walk ages to get to any of the train stations. Like if they're not walking from Ogden to the Hollywood stop, they can't get there. That doesn't take that into effect or into consideration at all. Right, but
You assume people in those uses, they assume people are gonna get on the train when they're not going to work.
sure, but if you're trying to commute
Which
from
isn't gonna happen.
from the east side of Ogden there, you're not gonna be able to walk to the Hollywood stop. Well, do we have a way forward then?
I believe so, yes. We need to get the map, and I need to create a parking ticket for everyone.
Does the commission feel comfortable with that?
I do.
We're gonna have to continue till we have our required.
Yes.
We're done besides this, right? We finished everything else, it's just parking now? Sorry, guys.
Parking was the last thing.
I know,
And when we started it, people over parking hadn't gone through or any of that.
I
sorry.
did not know it got approved, right?
Yeah, so now it's just a matter of moving it.
June
Because the
1st.
other issue, trustee Hendricks mentioned, the other, issue is it also includes like, bus stops.
Right.
Some of them aren't regular stops for people, but it includes that as a transit oriented area, so that's causing all sorts of problems.
Yeah, it's only certain bus stops, and it's, if there are a certain number of buses stopping there within a certain, within an hour, you need one every 15 minutes or
Right.
something like that, and,
So that's causing its own
Because that's gonna change over
Yeah, that's
time.
changing.
That's,
Of 2 or more bus routes with combined frequency of bus service interval of 15 minutes or less during the morning and afternoon peak commute periods.
and we don't have that anywhere in Brookfield.
Basically, the third person in the
So do we have to close out the recommend continuance of this?
Yeah, we're gonna close it out, and then
Okay.
do you have, another date? Once you do that, how long do you think? So we could schedule another meeting
Yeah.
for the workshop. Because what needs to happen is it'll go to the workshops for the zoning commission, then it's gonna come back to you for the planning and zoning. So we're just trying to kind of coordinate that, then it'll go to the board.
Okay.
So it'd be another one of these workshops.
Right, so they could take a look.
They could take a look and
Right,
maybe
they
find
final,
out.
only have to do the exact application of the new plan.
We're
Because that'll
making
make more
changes
sense
to
when it's
residential.
on the table.
Thank you.
And if you wanted to make
I hope so. That's
adjustments.
what they're going to create that graphic.
So I recommend continuance of the planning, or the zoning commission to a later date. to be
So
determined.
move.
Second,
Commissioner Evans.
Aye.
Commissioner Sayborn.
Aye.
Commissioner Svoboda.
Aye.
Commissioner Straka.
aye.
Commissioner Weber, aye.
Do we have any other updates?
And do we want to try to find a date, or do you want to do that?
Yeah, she's checking.
Oh, great,
out,
okay.
2 weeks from now, we do have, 4 agenda items for May 28th. So I'm thinking,
That'd be tough.
wanted to- May 28th. Yeah, you kind of, you can ask, some of the availability is now since we're all here.
So you were looking at before or after May 20th?
Either one, whatever works with schedules. They already have a regular scheduled meeting on May 28th.
Okay. I should be able to get that done relatively quickly.
Do we think the map will be ready by then?
Oh,
'Cause
that's the
by
question.
some-
Yeah,
Oh,
I would think so.
yeah, we'll check the GIS, but it's a little pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, he did this in, a day, And it was just meant to be a rough oversight, so have to be more precise.
Can I request not another Monday? Mondays are rough.
You already have a couple meetings a month.
The 21st? Thursday.
I have that available.
Works for me.
May 21st?
May 21st, does that work?
6 PM?
Good here.
We have 4 of us?
I'll be here.
Oh, 5, okay.
And I'll
And then
check
we'll
with,
find out Chuck and,
Commissioner Brenda, Karen.
Great.
But it
Also
sounds
a
like we'll have it.
What,
6
quorum?
PM start?
We'll send out
Okay.
a reminder.
Do 6 PM.
Okay. So we have to close this then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, make a motion to adjourn the Monday, May 4th, 2026 meeting for zoning at 6:57 PM. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Evans.
Aye.
Commissioner Sayborn.
Aye.
Commissioner Svoboda.
Aye.
Commissioner Straka.
Aye.
Commissioner Weber, aye.
Mark, I was the second on that.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
No, just another meeting, sorry.
if you want.
No one wants that